Okay, so I did a quick test on this about, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes ago to see if it was working because I've had quite a few issues with YouTube lately. I had a smaller channel that was about the gasifier and all that, and that's kind of been lost in the ether, as in I can't get back in it, although I've got all the passwords and all the stuff, and it's taken me days to get YouTube to even bother sort of replying in a sensible way, and eventually I just gave up. And now on this channel, I can't seem to upload videos, and I'm going through my software, make sure that's fine, but whatever. Uh, Other quick announcement before I start the whole thing is that there are subscriptions available for the channel now at 3 different tiers. I think you can see it. I'm not sure that you can or not. If one of you has got $2.99 to spare, click on whatever button, if there is one, a month, $2.99 a month, and then there's $5.99, and then there's like a gold plated one, which is $22.99, which if I get enough people on there, I'll get them a free subscription to Kurgan TV as well. But anyway, this is kind of not really the topic. There was a Fox put up a post about this guy whose wife's leaving him or whatever. Hello, Cordell, and hello, Matthias. Um, and he was giving some pretty sound advice to the guy. And then there's all other sort of people on Social Galactic like dropping their 5 cents in it and sort of saying, "Oh, you should do this or you should do that," and yeah, that's a good strategy. Excuse me a second. And I just thought, well, this is right in my wheelhouse. I've had 2 divorces, pretty brutal. So, oh, and a quick update on the gasifier for those of you that are on that as well. That's just a series of failures, and at the moment, you can probably hear in my voice, I'm not 100% of after my back injury, and that took a long while to sort of get better. I'm now better, but I don't want to do stupid things, and I need to do some exercises to, strengthen up the whole core and everything. And while I'm trying to sort of maybe start that, I've got this other thing going on in my lungs slash throat, nose, whatever. I've just had a bunch of blood tests done, and they all came back pretty, you know, tip-top shape, really. So I don't really know what's going on. There could be some things that cause that sort of stuff, and partly some of it might be related to the back injury. But anyway, it's just making everything a bit more complicated. And then I've had a bunch of paperwork issues, which I'm not going to get into. So although I'm not in a tragic moment of my life or anything, it's just one slog after another, after another, after another. And that was really sort of the topic that I wanted to cover on this video, which is, it's a pretty hard time for a lot of people. The last 3 going on 4 years now are, they've been hard for everybody for whatever reasons. I just found out actually that I didn't know the guy well. I only met him once for a brief period of time, but he seems like a nice guy, and he's was quite well known and good friends with my wife and her family. Um, and he had a beautiful, stunning looking lady as his wife. They had 3 kids, and she just passed away in her sleep. I don't know what the cause was. Some people can speculate on that, of course, but I don't actually know for sure one way or the other what caused it. But very sad. I mean, they were very happy. They had a beautiful family. The guy doesn't look like much, to be honest. He's, sort of, I don't know, a slightly uglier and poorer version of Ricky Gervais, but he was a hard-working guy he's just a good guy trying hard. And he got with this stunning-looking lady, and she passed away recently, and it's, that sort of thing can happen. The whole COVID situation is, well, you all know, you've all had your own struggles and stuff. So there are some people going through some really terrible things. We know people that passed away as a result of various things. Um, so there's that. There's divorce, which in some ways, obviously, divorce is not as devastating as your wife dying or something, but in some ways it can be even worse. With death, even if it is sudden or something like that, it you can have some kind of closure in a way. With very nasty divorces, it can be kind of years of mental and even physical and financial torture. It can be horrible. So I don't want to dwell too much on the details of this or that tragedy because they're all unique to every one of us. We've all had good times, we've all had bad times, and some of us have had pretty fucking terrible times. Um, there are two main things I think that are fundamental for you being able to navigate a terrible time well. The first one is a sense of self that is extremely strong. Now, if you've been very unfortunate in your upbringing, if you were abandoned at birth, raised through foster homes, abused as a kid, and all that, that's going to be very tough to have. Hello, Sam. Uh, hey, Kurganovich. Guess I've gone Russian now. But your own sense of, I suppose, what psychologists call self-esteem, but really it's your own sense of self. I don't like these things because I don't need them right now. Actually, your own sense of your place in the world, as in you're rooted to, like, who you are. Knowing who you are is fundamental. I'd say it's top priority. Um, Certainly from my perspective, it's top priority. There might be some people who say, "Oh well, believing in God is top priority," and that's point number two. That's my second point, and that may well be. And I think for the martyr class of human being, that could well be the case. But I'm not in the martyr class. I know I'm well below that station. If I'm probably in the warrior class, or and then there's the like normal civilian sort of class. For how I am and how I'm built, I definitely think that your own sense of self, your own sense of right and wrong, your own sense of what's true and what's not true, that's pivotal. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. And right next to it is obviously belief in God, which is an interesting thing because I didn't have that strong belief in God until I was in my 40s. I didn't, and then I had to have a road to Damascus. I had plenty of experiences that I think for a normal person would have definitely made them believers. I had plenty of experiences, things I don't talk about and I probably won't talk about. I've written some of them down in parts here and there for posterity, but I've had experiences that are absolutely unbelievable, but that are real, are objective. They happened in the world. It wasn't any kind of a hallucination, physical events and so on. That would have probably convinced the average person or most human beings to like believe in an afterlife, believe in God and so on. But I'm, a stubborn skeptic. And it didn't convince me. It convinced me that there was an intelligence behind creation. It convinced me that, the atheist, oh, it all happened by random chance is nonsense. But I already knew that from a pretty young age because I can do maths. So, um, and the thing is, if you have those two things, if you have belief in self and belief in God, there's a very clear difference in me now, the level of mental, emotional, spiritual strength that I have now with belief in God compared to my first 40 something years without that. And it's a different order of magnitude. And I mean, keep in mind, I have always been a pretty mentally tough person. Um, Even guys that are whatever, fitter, stronger, faster, younger, and all that, I'm trying to think of who has been able to keep up with me from a mental strength perspective that I've met, and I don't quite genuinely. I'm sure there must be and by the way, mental strength doesn't mean that you're necessarily successful at something. It just means that bloody mindedness to carry on going when everything is going wrong, or maybe you should give up. Maybe it's a smarter thing to give up. I'm not saying that you should never alter your path. Um, I believe in absolutely. I believe in being flexible and in altering your course when it's not the right course or whatever. But I don't really believe in giving up as such. And I think that started out at a very young age. And I had a boomer dad, of course, which, although he's a Sigma and is a kind of bought into the whole Japanese samurai duty thing. He bought into the duty more than he did the spiritual element of it. And I think genetically it probably comes more from his mother's side of things, because his father, my grandfather, was a very very stable dude. Like, that guy was like, just didn't flinch at anything in life, and never lost his cool, did what he had to be done. It was just a solid man. And I never really understood. My father discussed this with me at times. Said he didn't feel loved by his dad, and at times that might have influenced him or whatever. And I was like, well, it's like, oh, my dad never told me he loved me. It's like, well, fuck, Dad, you've never told me that either, but it doesn't bother me. And I mean, you'd have to be kind of a bit, I don't know, blind or self-obsessed or something to not know that Grandpa cares about. He never told me he loved me either, but the guy he was always there. He never missed a beat with anything. It's quite clear he loved you. It's like there's a scene in The Mummy. I can't remember which one of the Mummy films, but like when Brendan Fraser still looked kind of good. And there's a scene in it where he's arguing with his son, and his son's like not being headstrong or whatever, and he's just like, fucking, he's just a rude little prick or whatever. And his wife is like, but, honey, you never tell him you love it. And like the Brandon Fraser character turns around, looks at her and goes, I'm his father. It's implied. And it's like, it made me laugh, because it's like, yeah, that's kind of like my granddad was, it's like, it's obvious, And I do tell my kids I love them. I tell them that all the time. So I'm not saying it's necessarily the right way to go, but the thing is that I think that sense of self and that internal strength comes very much from feeling that you are loved when you're a very little kid, um, and knowing it in the depths of your soul. And I think it also comes from, some of it is genetic or divine, or it's inborn, but it can definitely be beaten down and broken, or built up and made stronger by your parents and whoever cared for you. The thing is, when you become an adult, when you reach a point where you're working, you've got your own life, you don't need to have it's always good to have people that love you, whatever, but let's say you had terrible parents, or you're an orphan or whatever. Once you become an adult, you can choose your level of self-awareness and um, your own internal identity. You can basically say, well, I want to be this kind of guy with this kind of attributes, with this kind of way of being. And then you can go after it and just build it up, develop it, like anything else. Oh, pardon me. Like developing a skill or developing a muscle or something. You just keep working at it until you have that attribute, and then it becomes ingrained. And there's all sorts of self-help books and neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis, and yeah, all those things are helpful. But and I'm not saying don't look into them. Go for it. But do it yourself. Trust yourself. You need to pick these things. You need to choose who you're going to be. You need to choose how you're going to react and how you're going to act or not act. You need to be the guy that chooses that. And if something happens that you're like uncomfortable with, that you're unhappy with, how you reacted. Something had whatever. The classic example is somebody says something nasty to you, or makes a joke, or bullies you, or pushes you around, or does something, and you're like, oh, you freeze up, and then you think of, oh, what I should have done, and that goes in your head for like 2 3 days or whatever. So when that happens, use that as an opportunity to learn, okay, what kind of guy do I want to be? Do I want to be the kind of guy that when like 15 people are like, hey, we can do what we want, he's gonna like try and fight even if it gets him killed? Is that smart? Is that who I want to be? Or am I going to be the guy that goes, yeah, whatever, just survive it? And oh, thank you, sir. Mr. Cordo, another super chat. Uh, let me read that super chat. I'll get to the super chat. Give me a sec. And or do I want to be the guy that goes, okay, guys, okay, and plays foolish, and then like gets them one by one later? Or do you want to be a guy that just tries and avoid it and doesn't care about it and doesn't lose sleep over it? Realize who you want to be, what kind of guy you want to be, and if a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people want to be James Bond. I want to be Indiana Jones. I want to be James Bond. I want to be the hero. That's fine. Then go and be the fucking hero, right? Stop talking about it. Stop pretending. Stop. Look, study, act. You want to be James Bond? By the way, the actual James Bond in the books and what, it was not a happy guy. And if you think about it, the James Bond in the films, imagine having that life. It's horrible. It's not a cool look. What you want to be is have the abilities of James Bond, but be able to be like a cool dad, a cool husband, a cool friend. That's kind of what everybody really wants. And I want, other people to look at him and think, oh, he's so cool, he's so fast, he's so strong, he's so rich, he's so whatever. I was never into like being famous or wealthy. I never cared about that. Wealthy is good. Sure, why not? But I'm not going to compromise my personal ideology, agenda, call it whatever you want, for money. Never have, never will. Which doesn't mean, I'll give you an example. I was hired basically as an infiltrator to like figure out if this company was ripping off the company that hired me. And I figured it out, and I started telling the people, hey, look, this is happening. You're going to get ripped off. You've already been ripped off here, there, and there. You're going to get ripped off more. You're going to lose about 15 million if you don't take action. They took no action. They took no action. Eventually, I told the like top guy, and he was like, oh, really? I'm like, dude, I'm doing reports every week to your like subordinates, so they're not fucking handing them on to you. And it was clear to me they weren't, because they stopped paying me and they kept paying the guy that was stealing the money. So, it was a bit of recycling going on there. Sort of a Ukraine situation, And I was getting paid stupid money. I could have just kept quiet and just, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, no, it's all going fine. And just kept getting paid stupid money. But I was like, no, fuck this. These guys are fucking bad people. They're, injuring honest people that are trying to just have a life and work and do their business. Fuck them. So I did what I did. I got fired. I got paid what I was owed, but I lost about 30 grand because I'd moved country literally, and I hired paid in advance for a year and a half or whatever, a property of an apartment in Venice and so on. So I lost money out of it. Didn't do me any favors. It put me in a pretty shitty situation for quite some time, but fuck it. I kept clean. That company collapsed, which didn't really matter because they sort of popped up again, mushroom-like, under a different name, like a couple of weeks later. But I like to think that maybe down the line somewhere I saved somebody that would have got in business with these people a lot of trouble that they otherwise would have had. So you want to be like Liam Neeson in Taken? I don't know. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that series. I'm not sure why exactly, but yeah. Um, and I'm gonna try and think of some fiction. Oh, what the hell is wrong with my glasses? Oh, that's disgusting. Must have. So, but yeah, you want to be a cool guy that, and not everybody needs to be like the cool James Bond. you could just be a really cool, nice, friendly local baker. You know what? I like those guys. They're the best kind of guys. A local mechanic who's got his little mechanic shop, and he does a good job, and he doesn't rip his clients off, and he's friendly. Man, what a great guy. Why wouldn't you want to be that guy? And it's we're coming into some interesting times, so there will be a need for some warlords slash James Bond types, I'm sure. But most people get by without needing to do that or being that. So let's see now. Super chat from Gordel says, thanks for the Rodney Stark suggestions. I've read through both. Have you read the book called The Myth of the Andalusian Paradise? I'm reading it now. No, I have not. Please tell us a little bit about it if you feel like it in the chat. I'll look into it. Hello, Nationless Nationalist, who says, Hail Kurganites, and Slanty, hello. So, the point is, you can choose. You're an adult, and you don't need to wait till you're an adult. You don't need to have moved out of your parents' home, right? If you're 15 or 16 and you start thinking, which kind of guy do I want to be? Be that guy. Start now. Start as early as you can. And if you're in your 60s and you're like, it's never too late. You're still breathing. You're still alive. Do it. It's never too fucking late. Look, I'm in my 50s and I got 3 kids under age 5. So, it's never too late. Just carry on, man. And so become that strong sort of character, right? That's point number 1. Point number 2, no one can force you to believe in God. And even if you've been brainwashed into believing in God, if that brainwashing is bullshit, it's wrong, that belief is not really yours. It's like a meme. It's like you're a little kid and your dad, your granddad, your mother put this like meme in your head, like, here you go, son, you're a Protestant, you're a Baptist. And like, well, Baptists are the good guys. And you've never had an original thought about that in your entire life. So for most people, that unfortunately is the problem. You've been programmed. You've been pre-programmed with bad software. 99.9999 times out of 100. Hello, Stinky Peterson. It's a disturbing name, Stinky Peterson. Why? But anyway, I get distracted. So, you don't want to be the kind of guy that doesn't have his own thoughts. Check them out. Some of the most satisfying, I put a blog post a day or 2 or 3 ago, I can't remember. It was from a Facebook post. This guy posted this on Facebook. And he was like, I was a lifelong Protestant, and all I knew about the Catholic Church was that it was evil and blah, blah, blah. And then he wrote about but I just started reading. I got curious about the patristic fathers, and I'm like, man, the more I read about the history of the church, and the more I realized this stuff is it's all Catholicism, And then, of course, there's a problem with that too, right? Because if you just go okay, Catholicism is it, yeah, let me just march my way to the nearest Novus Ordo church where they rape kids and they're all pedophiles. Well, that's not good. And Bergoglio does what? He protects pedophiles all the way through, and he appoints them to high office. Oh, something wrong there too. So, then you look into that. Then you find out about Vatican II. Then you find out about, the Catholic Church is the right one. But those buildings that are filled with what people say are Catholics, that's not the Catholic Church. Catholic Church is much smaller. There's only a few buildings left, and there's only a few bishops. But, there's enough. It's enough. It's visible. It's there. It exists. And by the way, there's people that I'm actually in the process. Adam sent me a link to The Women, The Truth, some blog of some woman that she just, she needs to learn how to make sandwiches. And I'm going to take it apart piece by piece in the next blog post. But it's just, the lies are there. They're obvious. They're starting to become so blatant, and almost everybody can see it. And do you have to do a little bit of work to understand, what sedevacantism is? Yeah, you might have to read a book. You might have to read what is it? This. There you go. You want to know what sedevacantism is? This book's 98 pages long. The bit that explains sedevacantism, let me just find it because I don't remember how many pages it is, but it's like, okay, there's the Protestants. In fact, the whole bit that points out the Catholics, meaning the fake Catholicism and sedevacantism and so on, runs from, there we go, from page 53 to 63. So it's 10 pages of like A5, all right? You want to find out what sedevacantism is? There you go, 5 pages. You don't even have to read the whole 98. That's just if you want to know about the agnostics, the Orthodox, the Protestants, and all the other guys. So yeah, you might have to read 5 pages. Well, so what? Learn. I mean, it's supposed to be the most important thing, right? God, is it true? Is it not true? What's going on? So, oh yeah, I'm aware of that. So Cordell Mitchell says the book I mentioned, which is called "The Myth of the Andalusian Paradise," blows apart the notion that the Muslim empire in Spain was some sort of enlightened society. It is very detailed and provides citations throughout. $15 for the audiobook. You Philistine, you should read the paper copy. But anyway, yes, it's absolutely well known by anybody that studies any little bit of history that, of course, the Muslims didn't invent the damn thing. What they did is they conquered a whole bunch of places that were Christian, Catholic. Let's be clear, Christianity is Catholicism. All the places that the Muslims conquered were Catholic. There was no other Christianity. It was only Catholicism. Yes, with popes. Yes, with the Mass. Yes, in Latin. And they took them over, and what they did is they enslaved the scribes, the scientists of the time, the astronomers of the time, the mathematicians of the time, the writers of the time, the translators of the time, and then made them translate all the stuff into Arabic. And as they continued to sort of attack and destroy Christendom, some people thought like they got conquered by the Muslims, are like, oh, but these guys know how to count and stuff. And it's like, without realizing that it was from their own people to begin with. That's in brief what the whole story is about. So nationalist says, what percentage of people do you believe ever have an original thought? It depends what you mean by ever. But let's say, I'm going to rephrase your question into being, what percentage of people do I think have original thoughts, at least often enough that it becomes significant in their life? I think possibly almost everybody occasionally has at least one original thought in their lifetime. But people that have consistently original thoughts that affect the path of their life to a noticeable or significant degree, I think are very few. Very few. I'll give you what my percentages from the study of hypnosis, hypnotizing a lot of people over years. The classical division of the mind is that your conscious mind is about 10%, and then everybody else is kind of lost. I've refined that to say the subconscious mind is about 60% and the unconscious mind is about 30%. But in reality, that conscious mind has a potential of 10%. In reality, I think people, if you're using 2% of it consciously, I'd say that's probably genius level stuff. And what I mean by that is the potential of your mind is astonishing. The subconscious and unconscious parts of your brain process anywhere between 2.3 million and 400 billion bits of data, of information per second. Your conscious mind can handle about a maximum of 13. So that gives you the gamma, if you like, the range of the issue. And our conscious mind is a tiny, 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 tiny speck of dirt compared to what our minds could do. And you can see this with like idiot savants. There are guys who can barely speak or hold a conversation, or pretty useless in social sort of realities, but they can tell you the square root of just about any number like instantly, faster than any calculator, or the square root of like a 7-digit number. They can just spit it out, and it's like, what? How the fuck do they do that? But it's possible. right? And if that ability is buried somewhere in somehow in how the mind, the brain, the mind both are wired in a specific way, that's a glitch. That's a guy who, like, maybe most of his brain doesn't work properly, but he's got a little glitch that's like, hey, that one area works really well. And so he's become what they call an idiot savant, which is, he's like an idiot, not in a rude way. The word idiot is actually a clinical term. It has a specific um, meaning that relates to both IQ and the mental abilities of a person. So, there's like retarded, idiotic, moronic, whatever. They are actual labels, and then they've become insults over time, but they were actually clinical labels to begin with. So an idiot savant is somebody who is like mentally, maybe is like at the level of a child in most things, but when it comes to certain specific functions, he can outdo all so-called normal people, which means that that ability exists in the human brain mind complex, call it what you like. And if we could access all that, we would be, oh man, the abilities that we would have are absolutely astonishing. Telepathy is a thing. If you don't have to believe me, there's a 2-hour video called No More Secrets by a guy called Michael Persinger. It was on YouTube. I've saved a copy of it locally for myself, but look it up. You know, well, you need to change that, Cordell Mitchell. I'm a Gen Z and I don't read. You need to change that. And I'm not saying that to beat down on you or to criticize you or your whole generation of lazy, shiftless illiterates. No, it's important to read. It's important to learn to read because there are some books and texts and things that you will not have access to if you don't know to read. And it develops another aspect of the mind that is very important. And it's an aspect of the mind that they're trying to destroy. And it's a certain level of focus, an ability to concentrate on one thing for a long time. It's absolutely critical. I'm telling you, please start to read. I know it's painful and difficult at first, but if you get into it and you start doing it for a few months, after a while, you become addicted. You want to be addicted to good things. You want to be addicted to being the hero. You want to be addicted to being able to read books. Those are the kind of things you want to be addicted at. Corner Mitchell says that Andalusia book also points out barbaric and evil Islam, how barbaric and evil Islam is, and the logical result of building a civilization inverted commas around it. It's a very, I remember seeing a meme where it's like, it's got a side by side, photographs of like one side is Christianity, the other side is like Islam, and in Islam it's got like this like Arab looking guy, like, I don't know if he's the guy from Indiana Jones with a big sword, like, screaming like that. And on the other side, you've got like the Romans first with their shield and sword, and then, like you've got like cathedrals and churches, and then it's like airplanes, and it keeps moving into like technology and advanced stuff and cool yachts and big boats and, flying cars, whatever. And it's like on the Islamic side, it's always the same. It's just a guy screaming with a sword. It's quite a funny meme. So yeah, I get it. Mm. Oh, interesting question, Stinky Peterson. What are your thoughts about the electric universe model? I think it's a good model in certain respects. I do think that the Big Bang also has some um, validity. But if you ask me to pick between the Big Bang and the electric universe model, hmm, I don't know. I personally, if I really, really had to give my best guess, I think it's a combination of the two. I think it's probably a Big Bang universe with an electric universe modality to it. Hale Bopp and pretty much any comet, if you actually study, what they really sort of doing rather than what they tell you they're doing. I kind of agree that we all know anyone that studies astronomy, anyone that's like looked into astronomy in any depth knows that NASA stands for never a straight answer. That's known. which is not to say that we live on a flat earth, and please don't even begin that, because I've recently gone on a little crusade against flat earther because I'm just tired of them. They're absolutely retarded. So hello, Woolly Ram. Stinky Peterson says, did the great saints have their sub and unconscious minds mostly illuminated by the light of God? Were their minds mostly conscious? It's hard to say because I wasn't one of them, but there are many reports of saints being able to do all sorts of miraculous things, as in traveling huge distances almost instantly, of in some cases being in two places at once, of being able to do supernatural healing of people. And let me put it this way, even when I was not a Catholic and I had no inkling of being any kind of a Christian, I I'm pretty fluent with a lot of physics and a lot of hardcore science. And if you're familiar with things like solitonic waves, quantum tunneling, and that sort of stuff, and also if you take on board the concepts that Rupert Sheldrake talks about, like for example, Rupert Sheldrake talks about the fact that the speed of light, which is supposedly a fixed constant, actually isn't really a fixed constant, and people get different measurements and they change from time to time to some degree. And he says, well, who says that light, the speed of light, has to be a constant? And funnily enough, I designed a little science fiction game, which is just about starships fighting, which I might publish one of these days, where that was my basic premise. And my basic premise was that there was sort of localized bubbles throughout space, if you want to call it, the ether or whatever, where light travels at different speeds and different directions, and therefore your hyperspace drive also functions at different speeds and so on. And that affected your particle beams and your laser beams and so on. And I did this when I was 16. And the thing is that model of the universe, I wouldn't say it's been proven right or anything like that, but it certainly hasn't been proven wrong. And it could definitely still be valid, And so if you understand enough about physical reality, all the miracles of the saints become, yes, miraculous, but they become miraculous because they are above normal. And technically, I wouldn't use the word supernatural because they're not supernatural. They are ultra-national. They're above the normality of the natural. They're a lot more of the natural, but they're not above it. They're not outside of it. They're not separate from it. For example, teleportation using quantum tunneling is possible. Potentially, it's possible. Why wouldn't you? Potentially, the whole sun could blink out of existence right now and appear thousands of light years away. Potentially, 0 point vacuum fluctuations could all coordinate in that one spot and make the sun disappear. Unlikely, no one's ever seen it happen. But have there been spontaneous creation of wormholes that have been actually recorded on both the radio towers where the plane took off and the radio towers where the plane landed? Yes, there have been at least one that I'm very aware of, and there have been other events of it. So there are spontaneous things that can happen, but I don't see any reason why a very focused and a very coherent mind, a consciousness, couldn't make all of these quantum tunneling effects coherent to the point that he can physically just think of a place and appear there. That's that's without any belief in God. And then you add belief in God, which accepts the miracles, accepts the so-called supernatural, what I like to call it ultranational, which is play on words there. It's not enough to be just a natural, a nationalist. It's ultranationalist. Uh, Woolly Ram says my brain is smarter than I am sometimes. Not sometimes, all the time. Your brain is keeping you breathing, keeps your heart going, keeps all sorts of things happening without you even having to think about it. Imagine if you had to think about pushing, the blood around your system and all that. You don't have to. Your brain's doing that for you. It's using other bits of your body to do it, but it's doing it for you. It's the brain that controls all the stuff, and it's the unconscious part of your brain. And Stinky says, assuming the world doesn't end soon, do you believe that mankind will eventually colonize outer space? Oh, well, I believe they already have. If you read my Overlords of Mars series, which I'm now working on the third book finally after a 10-year hiatus, and I have set myself a target of wanting to finish it by the end of this year, which is probably a bit, I'm a very optimistic person, but I'm going to try for it. If you read my Overlords of Mars series, which is science fiction, but it's a lot of science and a little bit of fiction, and in fact, if you consider that those books have been in my head since the mid 90s. I had a series. I have this thing that happens to me sometimes where I have a dream, and then like years later I have another dream, and then I have another dream, but they're like a sequence of dreams, and I remember them. And these happened all in a short period of time. They were all close to each other. But I had three dreams. Each dream is the starting point or the inflection point or the spark for each one of the three books. Which Overlords of Mars talks about Nazis on the moon and stuff like that, and Mars being colonized, and it's set in the year 1999, and it's set in the year 1999 because I had these dreams in the mid 90s, and I've had these books in my head for like over almost 30 years now, and I've written two of them down. The first one was in 2011, the second one in 2013, and now I'm going to do the last one hopefully in 2023. But the science that's in those books is it's not really fiction, and in fact, quite a few of the concepts that are in the books, which remember, I had these dreams in the mid 90s, and as far as the technology is concerned, as far as the people being on the moon and on Mars and that sort of thing, I think if you ask me right now, are there people living on Mars, humans living on Mars that we don't know about from Earth, right? If I had to give my best guess, I would say yes, that there are bases on Mars. If I had to give my best guess if there are bases on the moon, I would say yes. And maybe I'm totally wrong, but I would bet money that I'm not wrong for a number of reasons. Which, if you read my books, you figure out, you'll know about. If you read, you can read the fiction books, which is the Overlords of Mars, or you can read the non-fiction, which is the Face on Mars. So if you go on Amazon and you type in my name and surname, my books come up. Or if you go to my blog, click on my blog and go books I wrote. I have to update it. I haven't put all the books on there that I've written, but most of them are there. The Overlords of Mars are there. The Face on Mars is there. And if I was a better marketer, I'd probably be able to just sit on my ass and write books, because I've written pretty seminal books that are like the foundation for a lot of people's um, learning about stuff, and they're on very separate topics. The Face on Mars is about astronomy, human history. The Reclaiming the Catholic Church is, of course, about the Catholic Church, and Sistema is about Russian martial arts and martial arts in general, because I did that. Was my daughter asked me the other day, said, like, how long did you train for that? And I was like, well, I started doing karate when I was 3. There was some bits and pieces in between where I stopped. The longest period I had without without going to a dojo to train was about 5 years. But I still trained. I trained with my friends. I trained we made our own little. We used the gym of a university to train. So I was still training. I just wasn't training with an official teacher or whatever. So from about the age of 3 until I'd say 2014, up until 2016, I was still between 2014 and 2016, I was training again by myself or with a friend or when I could, because it was just work, traveling, or whatever. But basically, from 1972 or something till 2014, if you want to cut some out, I was doing martial arts regularly. So um, that information has gone into that one book. The Catholic Church, yes, I've only become a Catholic in 2017, but I studied obsessively for 4 years, everything I could get my hands on about Christianity, Catholicism, and so on. And 4 years of me being obsessive about a topic, it's roughly equivalent to like, a lifetime for the average person, or at least 20, 30 years. And I'm not being an arrogant prick saying that. It's just I've known this in time. And with the face on Mars stuff, again, that's something that since I'm a little kid, I mean, I was 3, 4 years old when I knew what a light year was, because I would ask these questions and nobody could answer me except one of my uncles. And he was like a geek, complete geek, and he'd sit down with me and he'd talk to me about it and say, well, this is how it works. And he bought me when I was already in Italy. I hadn't seen him for years, and he sent me through the mail a little telescope so that I could like watch the moon and stuff. It was a brilliant little telescope. I've now got a giant fucking telescope that I can't get the same images out of that I used to get from that little one. I need to set it up, and I don't really have the space in this particular house the way it's configured at the moment. I need to do some changes before I can put the telescope up, and then I'll probably learn how to use it. But you know, um, so sorry if I'm rambling. By the way, if you guys want to get back onto the topic or ask questions, because I said it was about tragedy and how to handle all that stuff. And the point is, if you have a good sense of self, and if you have a good, true belief in a true thing about God, whether you call it God, whether you call it the Catholic God, whether you call it whatever, but it has to be based in reality. Because if it's not, when that hammer blow comes, it's going to knock you down. Like I said, my ability to handle, adversity after becoming Catholic is 100 times stronger than what it was as a non-Catholic. And my ability to handle adversity as a non-Catholic is like, look, I'm 54 years old. Yeah, I'm 54 now, and I've moved 54 times in my life. That's an average of once a year, and I've been in the same place, you know, this particular one for 2 years, and in other places I've been the longest. I think I was in a place for like 3 years in one apartment, one house in one city, whatever. So 54 moves in 54 years means quite a few years there was more than one move. And they say, oh, the moving is one of the most traumatic experiences, and so is divorce. And well, I've been divorced twice, so I can handle a lot of like adversity and whatever. And I've had to restart whole businesses, whole careers, whole lives, really. Because yeah, I've only had 2 divorces, but I had meaningful relationships, more than two. Well, one of the longest relationships, but with the longest relationship I had was 13 years with my sort of first girlfriend. And yeah, we weren't married, but when that collapsed, that was quite a blow as well. So, you know, and then despite having spent so much time with one woman, and then then I went through a period where I went through a lot of women, and then went full circle, and I became Catholic, and now I'm married, and that's it. I'm happy that one woman, and that's good. So I've been through a lot, is my point. And it's not about, again, it's not about me being cool, me being the cool James Bond or whatever. I just happen to, as far as most human beings go on the planet, I happen to, yeah, fit in with that, like the cool James Bond guy. But it's not partly it's because I chose certain things, partly it's because of how I am internally, partly it's because of what's important to me. And you don't have to be like me, you have to be like you. That's the whole point. Be you, be 100% you. That's the whole thing. And if there's something about you that you don't like, change it. Change it. And it's like, it doesn't have to be a huge big deal. And yes, you can go to the hypnosis and the self hypnosis and the NLP courses and whatever. You can do all that stuff. But you know what? Ultimately, it's not that complicated. Be how you want to be. Be the kind of guy that you're proud of. Be the kind of guy that you say, fuck, that's who I want to be like. Like, yeah, but I'm like 5'2" and I want to be like a 6'5" guy surrounded by hot chicks and a 70-foot trimaran. be the 5'2" guy, surrounded by maybe two hot chicks, and you get a dinghy, whatever. What I'm saying is, we all have limitations, right? Just, what do you want to be? Oh, I want my spaceship. I want my anti-gravity spaceship to be able to, a big one, so I can bring all my friends and my family and travel the galaxy and just check out alien races and do cool shit. That's what I'd like to do. I don't have a fucking anti-gravity machine. Even if I did get one, they'd probably shoot me down because all the other bastards out here that have one, are governments, and they'll be like, well, we can't let him do what he wants. No, no, no. Tough shit. So, well, I'll just play around being the cool James Bond. That's what I can do on this planet. So that's what I'm saying. And also, another very important point for whatever traumatic shit you're going through, remember this. However bad you think things are, and there are actual clinical studies that have been done on this repeatedly over years, so it's not just the flip of the coin science, it's actually decent science that's been tracked for decades. People that had a tragedy happen to them, like they become paraplegic, or their wife die, or their kid die, God forbid, or something horrible happens to them, or their business completely collapses, they get divorced and they lose their kids or whatever, and they think, oh my God, my life's fucking over, and it feels like the end of the world. And then you're going back to them 5 years later, and they're like, oh yeah, no, it was a good thing I didn't jump off the bridge. And look, I can tell you that my own experience of this is absolutely the same, because again, with each divorce, it was like, man, that's the absolute, my first divorce was like, fuck, this is terrible. Not even 2, 3 years later, I was like, yeah, cool, I'm good. Then second divorce is fucking tragic because my daughter was involved. It's long, it's shit still going on there or whatever. But my life was pretty, I wouldn't say null and void, but it was like I was just I wouldn't say drifting because I've always been a purposeful guy, but I was a purposeful guy with like no target. So I was like, oh, there's a target. Okay, I'm going to go for that. Oh, there's a hot girl. I'm going to go for that. Oh, here's a cool restaurant. I'm going to eat there. Oh, here's a dangerous, shitty job. Yeah, I'll do that. Oh, here's a boring ass job. Yeah, I'll do that. Whatever. I was just like going with the flow. And then, if I think about 2013, March of 2013, February, actually, end of February of 2013 is when like my daughter was taken from me, like, and I didn't see her for like 9 years after, well, I saw her, I mean, she's been living with me now for 2 years, so everything's cool there. But so that February of 2013, I was like, fuck, my life is over. And I would have eaten a bullet if it wasn't that I had a daughter, so I had to stay alive. By 2016, that's just 3 years later, I was getting paid stupid money, living in Venice, the most beautiful city in the world. And yeah, I wouldn't say I was like ecstatically happy or anything, but I wasn't broken sad or anything. I was enjoying myself. I was enjoying my life. I still missed my daughter every day. I prayed for her every day, but even though I was not yet baptized. And then if I look like, okay, so 2013 to 2016, that was just 3 years. And the worst thing that I could imagine, one of the worst things, I can imagine worse, but one of the worst things that could happen had happened to me. And I was fine. And then if I look a little bit further, and if I look, oh, well, what about, 2019? That's just 6 years later. I was now married and had my first son with my wife. And it's like, you don't understand how far away I was from the idea that I could ever be married again, or ever. It's just like, man, that's it. I'm done with that. And then when I also realized, how far I was from the Christian ideal, the Catholic ideal, I was like, man, there's no way I'm ever getting married because I've just been working my way through women for the last few years, and I can't even relate to what I can understand it intellectually. That's the ideal, but man, I'm so far from that. And 6 years later, I was in it. So it's what you think is the worst thing that could happen to you. If you take that on and you just take that lesson and you're like, oh, you survived the waves and your boat has crashed and sunk, but you're hanging onto a piece of like, wood, and then you build that into a little canoe and then you build it up again. It's amazing. Um, so yeah, let me just catch up with a bit. Willie Ram says, when he's talking about his brain being smarter than him, I meant that my brain sometimes presents me with a correct conclusion, but with no explanation. Oh yeah, yeah. You need to trust those instincts, but you also need to differentiate between them and wishful thinking that's like trying to sneak out. So you must trust those instincts as long as you've made sure that your ego's not in the way. Staker Peterson says, I watched Dune last night and was quite impressed. It takes place in a neo-medieval future with emperors, dukes, guilds, and serfs. Very reactionary. I can imagine a future like that, except Catholic. Ah, the original Dune, I couldn't watch. It was like kind of what the hell. It was like Twin Peaks, one of those weird films. Then I watched. There was a little TV series, Dune, which I quite enjoyed. It was years ago, 2003, 2004, and now there's a new one which I haven't bothered to look at, so I don't know. Why are so many countries? Cordell says, why are so many countries all of a sudden landing shit on the moon? Why now of all times? Is it because the West is collapsing? I don't know. Once I figured out how Mars, the moon, and all that stuff worked, and how the bullshit that they were telling us about Mars and the moon, I kind of lost interest a bit because it was like, I've actually figured it out. I've figured out what happened on Mars. I'm the first one that's figured it out. I'm the only one that's figured it out. Graham Hancock has tried to plagiarize my idea. He did. He admitted it to me face to face, but still doesn't get it right. And whatever. I kind of figured it out. So I can't trust anything that they say now. So who knows if there really is Indians on the moon or whatever. I think it's a distraction. I think there's a coordinated effort to also the alien agenda is coming out right now. It's almost like they're skipping the asteroids because Werner von Braun, just for you who don't know, was the Nazi SS officer that invented the rockets that were dropping on London, the V1 and the V2 and so on, that then got taken over with Project Paperclip to America and became basically one of the head guys of the whole rocket program of the Apollo program. So for those of you that believe that the Apollo program went on the moon, Werner von Braun did it. Nazis did it. I do believe that the American/Nazis went to the moon. I don't believe they went there the way they tell you they went there, and all that footage is 99% fake. But I do believe they went there. But they went there with another guy called De Bois, or De Bois, I don't know how to pronounce it. He used to be on Wikipedia. He's since been scrubbed after I did a video. If you aren't interested in this stuff, go on my channel, go on videos, and go and look at video number 3. Video number 3. It explains all the stuff. But anyway, the point is, Werner von Braun was on record to one of his assistants, who then went on record in front of the House Senate, I believe, saying, oh, look, it's all bullshit. First there's going to be the Cold War. Now the Nazis lost the war, but keep in mind that the Nazis had enough land in Argentina to create their own small country. In Carlos de Bariloche, they spoke German. They had Nazi flags in the schools, and the German kids lived there. That's what they grew. And an Argentinian journalist in the 70s wrote a book called Hitler Died in Argentina, which nobody said anything because, it's an Argentinian guy. Just like this is like, he's a Dago, he's an Italian guy writing books about Mars, who cares, right? And not too long ago, a couple of American guys wrote a book called Grey Wolf, and it's basically, they took the Argentinian guy's work, fancied it up a bit, added a couple of their own bits, and hey, presto, now it's like, oh, Hitler might have been in Argentina. Well, we knew that in the fucking 70s. The FBI has known that since the beginning, and the CIA. The Freedom of Information Act has released documents that basically prove it. So, the point is, Werner von Braun said, first there's going to be like the Cold War, Russia and America, which was throughout the 70s and so on, 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Then there's going to be, the nations of concern, the terrorist nations, which happened, that was Iraq War, that sort of stuff. Then it's going to be asteroids, and then after that it's going to be a faked alien invasion. And he used to laugh about it. He said, alien invasion, can you believe what stupid people believe that shit? And it's all designed to just get all this technology up into space and away from human beings. So we want to, again, read my Overlords of Mars series. It explains all the stuff really quite well. So that's what I think is happening. And now they're coming out with all these alien, there's UFOs and there's aliens here and there's aliens there. There was one in Peru recently where they're saying, the aliens are like trying to attack people and whatever. And it turns out they were supposedly narcos, right, with jetpacks. scaring the people and whatever to like take over the area. Would narcos have jetpacks? Yeah, I believe they could. They certainly have enough money. If you look at what Pablo Escobar had and could do and what he bought and paid for, yeah, I absolutely believe that. But they try to sell it as, oh, aliens invasion. And that's what they're doing. It's like a lot of the so-called UFOs that you see are not necessarily from little green men or even, the blues or the grays or whatever. I do believe that absolutely anti-gravity technology is real. That's not a belief system, that's a fact. And I do believe, and again, it's a fact that it's been developed by the American military, but it's like a shadow government. It's not just the Americans. There were bases in South Africa and so on. So there's another government, there's another, the so-called elite or whatever, that they have this technology and they control it and they keep it sort of quiet and they kind of kill anybody that like tries to make it public or whatever because it's kind of dangerous and also they just want it for themselves and there's factions probably or whatever. But given that this technology is real, it makes absolute sense that another intelligent race, maybe much older than us, would have come across it before. And do we have evidence in our solar system that there is such a thing? Yes, we have. The whole of Mars. It's like the dead body. Mars is basically a corpse lying in your living room lounge that proves that guns exist because it got shot twice. And again, if you read my Face on Mars book or the Overlords of Mars science fiction series, all the stuff is explained in a lot more detail there. So that's possibly why I think a lot of this stuff is. Think if you did on sci-fi, tried Catholic. Yeah, don't know the half of it, boy. Once I'm finished with well, it's not really a trilogy. I'm scared to say it. It's basically a quadrilogy. There's like 3 books, and the end of the 3rd book is going to be pretty sort of definitive in a way. But there is a 4th book coming out, and I'll not all, but like a good chunk of the more intricate plot lines, because my books have plot lines that are deep, get resolved in the 4th book. A lot of them will get resolved in the 3rd book, which I'm writing now, but not all of them. So, yeah. Fox is right when he says to fail faster. Absolutely. And again, another little simple, stupid example. Like, I learned to ski in 1 day. I'd never put on skis before, never tried it, never done it. And when I put them on, I was like falling over, like an idiot. And I was like, oh, but how do you do it? And people say, oh no, you've got to put your skis like this to stop. And I was like putting them like that, and I'd keep going. It just wasn't fucking working. And I was like, I looked at my cousin, and she was going. I always had a bit of, we understood each other quite well, my cousin and I, because we were the same age, so we went through some primary school together. And I looked at her and I said, listen, how do you go? How do you like go? And she goes, you just lean forward. And the boots will hold you up because they're like big, strong boots, right? The skiing boots. Says you just lean forward, like you would fall over if it wasn't for the boots holding you up. That's how you go. I'm like, oh, cool, thanks. And that was it. All the other advice, a bunch of bullshit. So I got up, go up to the ski lift. I get to the top, and then I just like go. And it's like I'd fall this way and I'd fall that way, and I like try with the stick, and oh no, it's not really about the stick. And then I push this, and I was like. And at first, I was basically trying to be too gentle. That was the problem. I was trying to be too perfect. I was like, no, fuck this, and just be rough. Then I got it. And by the time I got it, I realized, no, you push on this foot, you go that way. You push on that foot, you go that way. And to stop, I don't need to do this like, oh, put your things like that and split your legs. And I can't do the splits, even despite years of martial arts. I'm not Jean-Claude Van Damme. That's not me. I don't have childbearing hips. So no, screw that, like, snowplow thing. Fuck that. I'll just turn on both skis and shh. And I'd stop right there, like an experienced skier. But I never put the skis on before that day. Did I fall 200 times? You bet your ass I did. But by the end of the day, I was doing a red piste without falling down. So, fail faster is absolutely correct. The best guy the guy that's thrown the best punch, or the guy that's thrown the best baseball home run, how do you think he got to hit that best baseball home run? Because he missed thousands of the fucking things. He made errors on every level. And then he did it so much that eventually he got better than everybody else. So it's just a numbers thing. You just got to keep at it. And it's like how to deal with constant low level, almost background radiation levels of trauma. Well, we're all living through that. okay, this is going to sound glib. Ignore it. Start by not watching TV, not reading newspapers, not watching news of any kind. Stop that shit. Stop getting plugged into the model day of what's going on in the world. Beep, 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 beep. Today, 15 children died drowning. Beep, 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 beep. Today, your dog is sick and it could be cancer. You should take him to the vet and pay $1,000, even though you're only earning $1,000 a month. Beep, 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 beep. Fuck all that shit. Do your job like a fucking zombie, but, do it well. I'm not saying do it wrong, do it badly. But whatever your job is, do your job. You got to eat, so fine, do your job. But you don't have to be there, right? You can do your job. I mean, I this is what I did throughout my so-called professional career. I did my job well. I did my job better than most of my colleagues. But so what? I was just doing my job. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I got to do that. As soon as I'm out of there, I'm out of there. I'm out of there. Connect with nature. Walk home. Look at, even if it's you're in a city and you're like, fuck, there's not even a park. Walk home. Just walk home one night. Maybe if you're in certain cities, you want to be able to carry, if you want to walk home and get there alive, but I don't know, it depends where you are, right? I was like looking, I was actually telling this to my wife today, I think it was, today or yesterday. Like, I've got a lot of crap going on at the moment. I'm physically not well. The gasifier is basically a year late. I'm feeling terrible about that. And this fucking book isn't, is the layout and everything is becoming a pain in the ass. There's a bunch of other issues that I'm trying to deal with, which are just, again, painful, bureaucracy, blah, blah, blah. My car died, so that's another expense I wasn't planning on. That it's fucking happening. And, thank God for, like, the good friends I have, and so on, and my kids and all that. But a lot of just nothing super major, but, like, all bad shit that's, like, just, wears down at you. And I'm like, fuck. And I just thought, screw all this. And I just went for a little walk near a road. And it's like, yeah, there's this shit and there's that shit. And it's a conscious effort. You've got to learn to don't sweat the small stuff, as they say, right? Oh, but the world is going to hell. Hot war in Europe. You know what? Ain't nobody shooting at me yet. It's like my Sistema instructor, right? He was saying, it's like people, they panic, they're too early. I am punching you. And this is like how you take blows in Sistema, right? There's no actual block. You let the blow kind of land, but you just redirect it. And it's like when you get it wrong, you get hurt, right? And it's like, but you must wait, because you move too fast and the guy will change and boom. Wait, because you move too fast and the guy will change and boom, he'll knock you. It's like you must have, wait. A punch is coming, but it's not there yet. A punch is coming, but it's not there. Punch is touching my face. Yeah, but it's not broken your lip yet. A punch is now pushing into my face. Yeah, but it's not knocked your teeth out yet. And then you can move. And it's like dentist. I'm scared of dentist. I hate dentist. But I'm saying, why I must worry when I'm waiting? Why? The drill is not there. And even when I'm in the chair, now the drill starts up. Yeah, but it's not in my tooth yet. Why should I worry? It's a mental attitude that you need to force yourself to get. I hope that answers your question somewhat. Brian Ferry, how does reconfiguration of your house help the telescope? Well, it's a big telescope. It's heavy. It's not something that you can pick up and move around. Once it's set up, it's pretty much going to stay there unless you get like 3 or 4 big guys to carefully lift it and move it. And it's got a tracking mechanism as well. So I need to build a place where I can put my telescope inside. And it's, obviously safe, protected from the weather, but it has, a skylight or something that opens so that I can point it at the sky and look at what I want to look at. So that's how. Stinky Peterson, as far as setbacks, I periodically experience them. I don't attribute all of them to the evil one. Usually it's my own fault. Usually it is. I found that invoking the intercession of the Blessed Virgin helps. The Blessed Virgin under the title of Our Lady, Undoer of Knots. There you go. It absolutely helps. You know what? There's a section in my book, Sistema, which, keep in mind, this was written 2011, so long before I became any kind of a Christian, but I was experimenting because I am a scientist by nature and a philosopher. So I'll experiment. If people say, "Oh, if you say a Hail Mary full of grace while you're fighting, you fight better." It sounds counterintuitive, but I did it and I tried it, and it works. And it works, and I had an explanation in my book of why it works, why I think it works at the time. Now I have an additional explanation to it. It doesn't invalidate what I explained before, which is, I think, when you let go of the tension of I have to win this fight, because now you're all focused and tense. Now, if you're saying Hail Mary full of grace, while you're saying that, your focus is somewhat removed from the fight. So you're more relaxed. If you're more relaxed, you telegraph less. If you telegraph less, your movement is going to be more invisible. And if your movement is more relaxed, it's going to be faster and more accurate, and it's going to get there precisely, and your rhythm is going to be more correct. So you will perform better. So, which it also goes back to, Wooly, your question. Stop focusing on this low-level trauma. It's background radiation. It's like become a mutant. You're like, it's radiation. It's healing me. It's giving me a suntan, Brian Ferry, it's all self-actuated. No, it's not all self-actuated. Some things do come to test us, I think. Yeah, Cordell says all the bullcrap hits in a wave, it would appear. Or a set of waves, like surfers. Surfers tell you, there's usually 3 waves, and then there's the big one. Yeah. Look, like I said, the thing is, what's it saying? You can think of it as life is brutal and short and ugly, and then you die. And you can go through life thinking that. And let's say that's true. Let's say life is brutal, short, ugly, and then you die. But going through it with that mindset, is that the best? And I'm not talking about being delusional, like, just a leg, that's probably a good thing for... I'm not saying about being delusional, but sometimes you lose a leg, and yeah, it's fucking not nice. But sometimes losing that leg opens up other doors that you wouldn't have otherwise seen. They're not necessarily the doors you thought you wanted to open. They're not necessarily the doors you wanted to open. But they might be the doors you need, It's, that's just how life is. It's fortunate, unfortunate, call it what you want, but the Russians have this sort of fatalistic saying, which is everything happens for a reason. And I kind of understand how they mean it, because you can. It's a simple saying, right? And in the Churchian approach, it's like, well, everything happens for a reason because God decided it. That's a Calvinist approach, right? Oh, your son dies. Well, God decided. No, not necessarily. But everything happens for a reason. Now, that reason could be that you're stupid. That reason could be that God made it happen. That reason could be that, you've got demonic oppression and that made it happen. The thing is, regardless of what happens in your life, you can learn something from it. And while that lesson is not always a good one, or let's say a pleasant one, it can be a harsh lesson, it can be a hard lesson, it can be a tough lesson, it can be an almost totally destructive lesson, but it's a lesson nevertheless. It's knowledge, it's information, it's a kind of power. And I'll tell you guys a little story of an extreme situation. And let's, my detractors will say that, like, oh, if you talk about past lives, you can't be a Catholic and blah, 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 whatever. But I had experiences that I can't really explain, other than possibly they were past lives or memories of somebody, whatever. Whatever your explanation, which doesn't necessarily need to be 100% it's past lives, but I've had experiences where I believe that I remembered. And it doesn't have to be me. It's not about me. So let's say, whatever, some guy has an experience that he remembers being a red Indian, where, like when whites started to appear and they started to kill red Indians, and there was no phone, so one tribe sent a couple of guys that say, hey, the whites are coming. These whites, these crazy, weird, violent, destructive people that come and kill us. And It's like, oh, we've kind of heard about that, but it's like, don't they just shoot buffalo or what? Are they real? Do they exist? And it's like these two guys saying, no, 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 it's real. Okay, now we need 2 or 3 of you guys to come to our camp. So we came to tell you, now you come and listen, you know. So 3 guys go away, and then they come back, you know, after a couple of days, they come back, and their camp's been totally destroyed. Everyone they loved has been butchered. You know, one of these guys, their loved ones, their family, their wife has been killed, their kids. Everybody in the village has just been destroyed, and all the teepees have been burnt down and scalped and so on. And then, you know, these 2 survivors go on to kill white people, men, women, children, as many as they can, as long as they live, until eventually, you know, one of their own kind of their own numbers kind of betrays them because he's sick of living this way, and they all get killed by the white cowboy guy, you know, the whatever, the U.S. Military, the Blue Jackets, and in the last instance, one of these guys gets shot through the heart and like falls down, and like the feeling he has is like, oh, thank God it's finally over, you know, and he's feeling of gratefulness towards the guy that just shot him in the back and blew through him, because his life was hell, you know, and he was the leader of these guys that was killing men, women, children, trying to destroy the white people off the face of the planet. And then, you know, he has another life and whatever, meets some of the same people, remembers all the stuff, and eventually meets one of these people, and this person says, you know, I remember you, and they recognize each other, and it's like, yeah, but you know, that it's like, oh no, you did a great thing, you were our leader, and it's like, no, I wasn't a good guy, man. I was like fucking just wanted to burn the world, you know. And the other person says, but gets angry and says, but don't you understand? Don't you understand what you did? I'm like, well, yeah, I killed a whole bunch of people, and I got my men to kill a whole bunch of people, and I didn't care if my men died doing it because I just fucking wanted to set the whole world alight. And then, you know, she said, but do you not understand? That's white people were doing that to us because they thought we were like animals, like beasts, you know, we were just like random things that had to be destroyed. You doing it to them made them understand that we were just as human as they are to some extent, and it changed the dynamic of how people see each other in that time. And I was like, fuck, that makes sense actually. But still, it felt like, dude, that's how fucking heavy a price is that to pay, you know, just to learn that one little lesson, or to teach that one little lesson to other. I'm like, fuck, man, don't pick me again, you know. That would be like my attitude, right? But the thing is, if you look at it in the scheme of from God's perspective, and let's say there are past lives, let's say there are, like, you know, each one of us gets, I don't know, 50,000 lives or whatever. Yeah, well, okay, in that life you suffer, and in that life you suffer, in that life you suffer. But in the big scheme of things, when the second coming comes and we all go to heaven or whatever, all the good guys anyway, all the ones that were loyal, it's nothing, right? And again, if you read the Bible, it tells you that, right? It says, well, when you do wake up, when you eventually get to the beatific vision, all your troubles will be like evaporate, like a little, all tears will be dried, all eyes will be dried, you know, they'll, whatever you suffered through would be like, oh, no, that was just a stupid little bad dream. Man, it was a nasty bad dream, but whoa, it's a bad dream. Okay, go now, what's for coffee, you know? And it sort of makes sense in that respect. So if that's the way it works, then it sort of fits. So the reason exists. You might not be able to figure out what it is. You might think it's X and really it's Y, and it might not be a pleasant lesson to learn, or a reason that is sufficient for you to be at peace. But it's kind of true that there's always a reason for things. Woolly Ram says, nah, life has snails in it. They're pretty cool. I love snails. They taste lovely. And same thing with the octopus, and they taste great. And the thing about octopus is they're intelligent. So it's like, but they taste so yummy. And the thing about snails is, like, I can't even remember what it was, but it was like I got a bunch of them because we have them all over the place. And I got a bunch of them, and I was going to cook them. And then I was like, something happened. I can't remember if it was one of the kids was sick can't remember. Something happened. I was like, fuck. Okay, if that gets fixed, if that gets better, I'm gonna let all these snails go. And it got, I think one of the kids was sick. I can't remember what it was. I can't even remember what it was. But I said, no, I'm gonna let these snails go, and that's it. I let them all go, and it's funny, right? Because it reminds me of my dad now. Just a story he told me. And the thing is, I only said I let those set of snails go. I didn't say I wouldn't eat any more snails. But the thing is, I haven't touched one since. And my dad had a similar experience. I just remembered that when we were in Nigeria, malaria there was all over the place, and my mom got it, and my brother got it. But me and my dad, we didn't. We got bitten. We have some kind of immunity apparently. And he said, he always wanted to shoot these birds. They're basically like crows, but they're like black with a white band across here. And in Africa, they're quite common. He always wanted to shoot one of them, and he'd never managed to shoot one of them. And then, he was walking home, and my brother was really sick. And he had his shotgun, and he saw one of them, and he thought, no. If I get home, and my son is okay, and he's not sick anymore, I'm never going to shoot one of those birds ever again. I'm never going to even try. And he never managed to shoot one right before that. So it was something he wanted to do. And it's like, he got home, my brother was better. He never shot one of those birds. But it doesn't end there, because it's not just that he wouldn't shoot those birds anymore. He never did. But if anybody else tried to shoot one of those birds in his presence, we're like, don't you shoot that fucking bird, I'll shoot you. It's like, and he just tell people, don't shoot that bird, that I made a promise, and it's like, the fuck, dude, that was your promise, but, he's quite a forceful personality when he wants to be. So, I don't know, he's fucking saved those weird crows from being shot by anyone, anytime, I think. So, kind of funny, I guess. The Catholic teaching, Wooly Ramsey, the Catholic teaching about the difference between God's explicit will and permissive will is important. Yeah, it is. I think it's instinctively very simple to understand, but some people probably need to spell it out. Yeah. And it's never a bad idea to spell things out, to get it. Stinky Peterson says, my early apparent memory is of a past life. I was 4. I'm still agnostic about reincarnation, though. Whatever the case, we should be aiming for the kingdom of heaven. Exactly right. Exactly right. That's pretty much my same take on it, too. I think the Bible has passages that are quite clearly indicative that some kind of reincarnation or soul transmigration or past life thing is possibly a thing. But I absolutely agree with the Catholic Church that you shouldn't focus on that. It doesn't matter, and you should focus on this life. And I absolutely believe that's correct, because the Catholic Church does have some tiny, tiny sort of exceptions for X, Y, and Z, but they don't teach you about the exceptions for X, Y, and Z for very good reasons. The first is you'd get all the churchians going, oh, but there's an exception, and that's me, I'm special, so that's just for me. No, it isn't. Shut the fuck up and just do what the priest tells you. That's reason number 1. Reason number 2 is that by doing that, and also in certain specific things, specifically like exorcism, you even trying to look at that little exception or tiny rule that they don't talk about would put you in grave danger, and put your soul in grave danger, and people around you in grave danger. So it's like, just shut the fuck up. That's for like special forces guy. It's like saying, well, could a normal guy that's only shot 5 times at the range, but he's got his gun, and his house gets invaded by I don't know, 5 Mossad agents that are intent on killing him because they got the wrong house. Would he be able to pull out his gun in the darkness with his kids around him, shoot all the 5 Mossad guys dead? Can it happen? Yeah. If that happens a million times, there's probably going to be that one guy that just gets real lucky, kills the 5 Mossad guys, and he's fine, and his kids are fine. Now, does that mean that every average guy that only goes to the shooting range 5 times in his life should have a loaded gun in his home late at night? And no, you're going to have a lot more dead kids, dead wives, and even the guy himself dead from his own firearm than you will ever save by the one guy that gets the 5 Mossad, right? So in the first instance, that sort of thing happens by, let's say, God's will. Like take Joan of Arc, right? When Joan of Arc went to the priest and said, "Oh, but I see this and that," and the priest said, "Shut the fuck up! You're an illiterate little peasant. Go back to making sandwiches." That's basically what the priest did, right? And they ended up burning her at the stake. There was also corruption and a whole bunch of other things. But the point is, the priest's attitude to like a guy that says, "But I'm special and I've got this ability and I can do this," is like, shut the fuck up. Go to church, pray, do the sacraments, and be a good Catholic. Yeah. Why? Because if God is determined that that guy is going to be a tool for some reason, nothing will change his mind. He's going to be like, yeah, okay, whatever, priest, fuck you, I'm still going to do it. And by the same token, if, say there's some really hard-headed cretin that keeps doing the same thing life after life after life after life after life after life after life, and somebody has mercy on him and says, yeah, okay, let's show this guy some past life so he remembers and maybe like takes a slightly different route this life. Maybe that it's just specific to that guy, because he's a retard. You don't need that shit. Focus on this life, do well in this life. So that's kind of, I absolutely believe the Catholic Church is right in saying those things. And it's the same thing with like, oh, but what about fairies? Are fairies evil? Do they exist? What about tree spirits? And those little, oh, I don't fucking know. And it doesn't matter. Because you start messing around with that shit, the likelihood is you're going to open yourself to things that are, here be dragons, or to use the H.P. Lovecraft theme, out there are intelligences that are vast, much older than you are, much more powerful than you are, and it's their world, and they hate you. So don't go fuck with that shit. Stay in your stay in your lane, So, yeah. Wooly Ram says, I have a feeling Africans understand about self-imposed spiritual bans. Well, yeah, there's, I suppose from a Western perspective, you could say they're a lot more, superstitious than we are. And but the thing is, the mind creates, I've told the story before, I've seen like a woman get like deathly ill from having a piece of baboon skin thrown in the back of a t-shirt, and then get better the next day because, the white man magic of my dad crushing 2 aspirins and giving it to her fix the bad juju, that's what they call it, the black magic that the one lady had done to her, So, Stinky Peterson, you'd have to reconcile reincarnation with purgatory and the hell realms. Perhaps reincarnation is occasional. There are so many explanations. Perhaps it's occasional. Perhaps this is purgatory. How could you tell? Perhaps we get a certain amount of time, or who knows? Maybe God decided, God, these guys are too stupid to ever achieve salvation unless we give them another 50,000 years, and that's why the second coming hasn't happened yet. For all you know, he's decided without telling everybody that, like, I'm gonna give these guys like 200 lives each just to like figure shit out. Who knows? You don't need to know. It's like it's not like relevant to how you live your life, really. I mean, and to the occasional guy that maybe it is relevant, that's his thing, right? Just let him deal with that. Let that be his thing. So, reincarnation makes me inclined to think God allows us to reincarnate until we deserve to enter heaven or fail somehow. Yeah, that's exactly what I just said, right? I mean, if God is merciful, I know my lifetime, right? This lifetime, I'm like, well, okay, fuck, I think maybe I kind of got it. But man, there is no, I believe that if all you had was one life to figure out Catholicism is right, for a guy like me, you know, I think at a minimum I'd need at least a millennia or two. I think it's quite likely that it's probably a few millennia of trying before I eventually would get to the point where I'm like, oh, Catholicism is real. Yeah, that's the way, man. I can see it now. And it's partly because I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm particularly stubborn. Some people will laugh. If my wife is going to watch this one, she will burst out into tears of laughter. But It's not that I'm actually stubborn. It's not that. And it's not that I'm arrogant. It's not that. It's that I really, 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 but really, really want the truth. And if I think I've got it on some aspect of life, I'm no, I'm not so stupid to believe I have it in every or even major or even main ones. But if I think I have a decent chunk of the truth about whatever, you have to prove to me that there's at least more, or that the ones that I've satisfied myself are correct are in error. This is not impossible. It might seem impossible, but it's not. Certainly, it's not for God, because after 42 years or whatever it was of 40, 10 years ago, 40, 44 years of like being Zen agnostic, all of a sudden I had my road to Damascus moment. I was like, oh, whoa, okay. I was fucking wrong for 44 years in a row. Like, and that's just this life, right? If there was others, it was probably whatever. But so it's possible. It's gonna be pretty hard for another human being to do it, because I'm pretty smart. I've had a pretty interesting life, and I test shit. I don't just come up with the idea that's like, oh, this is a pen because yeah, it looks like one. No, I've like gone through it and checked it and opened it up and written with it and see, oh, it's got different colors, and yeah, it writes, and this is the little ball, and then I used a magnifying glass, and I've spent 6 months studying this thing. And when I say it's a pen, and somebody comes along and says, no, that's a back scratcher, well, dude, good luck convincing me, because you're gonna have to have done some pretty fucking solid work with evidence that is more than the work I've done, and the evidence is better than the one that I've got. Now, on some things that I'm, not interested in or haven't looked at, some guy comes along and says, "Oh, by the way, this works this way because X, Y, and Z," and I don't even have enough information to know if X, Y, and Z is real, but it's like it sort of makes sense. I'd be like, "Oh, cool, thanks for telling me that," or explaining to me, because I'm ignorant about that shit. But if you're gonna talk to me about Mars or the fucking moon being a lamp, and go fuck yourself. So I hope that explains in polite terms what I'm talking about. Willie Ram says, God created trillions of spirits. Some might be tasked with overseeing aspects of nature and have no bearing on our salvation. Exactly. Yeah. Cordell says, I agree. God has already changed his plans once after Adam and Eve failed. Who is to say he won't change it again? Exactly. He's God. He can do what he wants. Willie Ram, a thought question about reincarnation. How differentiable is a father from his son when viewed from outside of time matter? Well, all souls are differentiable, because, again, I don't want to get too deep into this, because I don't want to spark thoughts that are counter Catholicism, or that the detractors of Catholicism can use to try and pervert people into the wrong paths. But my experience, my personal experience of people that have passed on, or my own memories or reincarnation or whatever you want to call it, I believe that, I've written a blog post about my theory of boxes. So if you go into the search me function, look up the theory of boxes, and this may relate. I think that once we die, our souls are a lot more able to see everything, to see your whole past, to see your whole life, to see why the relationships you had with other people on earth, how they related, and that even your so-called enemies might become your best friends in heaven, if you like, as souls, one soul to another. It'd be like, oh, that's why you were such an asshole to me. Oh, it was because of this thing and that thing, and we were trying, And there may be all sorts of reasons that we have no idea about when we're here that I think are valid when we're up there. A very interesting lady, whose name I forget, who had a near-death experience, and a lot of people that have near-death experiences have this kind of thing happen, where they like get temporarily shown while some of these things have happened. And like in her case, it was like she was divorced and the husband had abandoned her children and whatever. And it was like the explanation she got was like, oh, but don't you see, in that man's life, your ex-husband, that he'd been abandoned and his great-grandfather had been, it was a chain of abandonment. By him abandoning you and your kids, your son now has broken that cycle and he's never going to abandon his kids. He's always going to have like a strong marriage and whatever. So that needed to happen for the chain to be broken, because your son, having seen what you suffered through, is never going to behave like what his dad did. So again, everything happens for a reason, sort of thing. But like, um, it's what was I trying to? What was the point of this? It was like the thing is, you don't really know. Like, what was it? Was it that I read that made me think? Oh yeah, the difference between a father and son. And so in that aspect, then each soul is unique. You recognize each soul as a soul. So the fact whether somebody was your dad or whether you were their son, or whether they were your friend in another life and then they were your dad in another life, and then or they were your mom in another life and then they happen to be like your wife in this life, who knows, it doesn't matter. It's not like an incestuous sick thing. It's like it's souls. So it's almost like if reincarnation is a thing, it would be like, okay, well, I need to like, say like, say you've got a good friend, right? And you have these past lives, and like one guy's always leading and the other guy's always following, and they're like best friends throughout different lives in different ways and whatever. And maybe at one point, the one that's always following has to become the other one's dad, just to break this thing where it's like, dude, I'm your friend and I want you to be your own man. Stop fucking following me. I love you. You're a good guy, but you gotta have your own mind. And the only way for him to maybe get his own mind is for him to become dad to the guy that he followed all this time. Maybe he becomes his own man that way throughout living a life that where he now has to be the dad of the guy that he followed the whole time. And maybe that's an agreement that these souls could make, where the leader friend says, hey, fuck it, I don't care, I'll be your kid throughout a life just so that you can learn to like go your own way or whatever. That could happen. So I don't see that there's a I think every soul is differentiable. There's not like it's no confusion, I think, between souls at that level of, when we don't have bodies anymore and it's just like our soul consciousness, call it what you want. Very interesting, powerful questions you guys have done this session. I've gone an hour and 40 minutes or so. I'll give you guys another minute or so in case you want, while I have another sip of my Garda. That's what this one is called. Irish police. I'm sure the Irish police probably drink this stuff. So if you have any more like last minute questions or whatever, fire them out now. Otherwise, while I wait for that, I wish you all a very good night and thank you for being on board. We've got quite a bigger crowd today, 24 people apparently right now. So thanks for that. I hope it was useful. I hope that the initial part of this whole topic, which was like how to deal with tragedy, divorce, bad shit. Remember those two main things. Have a strong sense of self and a strong, real belief in God. And the third thing, remember that however bad something feels, however bad it looks like, if years down the line, you'll be okay again. Why do you always talk about eating the poor snails? I love snails. They're juicy and tasty. But I haven't eaten any since, I said about those snails. I wasn't talking about all snails, but I've gone over and above so far. I'm not promising I will never eat another snail because I kind of like them. Cordell says, I've resigned myself to explain the Trinity in my head, that all three aspects share a divine will, which is God. Yeah. But look, Cordell, the thing is like, I don't remember now. I don't want to cast aspersions. Perhaps you were an Owen Benjamin follower, and perhaps his nonsensical blasphemy has, put doubt in your mind or whatever. But how does the Trinity affect your day-to-day life. If that's interesting to you and you want to go deeper on it, by all means, go for it. But personally, I'm like, well, there's Jesus and there's God. There's God the Father, Jesus the Son, and then there's the Holy Spirit, which proceeds from both because I'm Catholic and I can read, which is what it says in the Bible. So, cool. Oh, but it's the Trinity. Okay, it's the Trinity. Cool. I don't need to know how it works. I understand how a combustion engine works in principle, generically. But when my car fucked out and I opened it up and it's all closed in because it's got computer things now that you need and whatever, fuck it. I don't know how to fix it. I don't need to. Take it to a garage. I mean, it would be nice if I could fix it myself in like $50 instead of like a fucking grand or whatever it is. But, I don't need to know how something works in order for to be okay with it, and I don't think it makes that much difference. So Woolly Ram said, "They're beautiful little clots of snot placed on earth by God Himself." Well, I guess if if clots of snot are your thing, Woolly, who am I to say otherwise?